Most people are throwing away $40 every single time they buy brisket, and they don't even know it. Here's what I mean. A whole packer brisket from your local warehouse store runs about $4 to $6 a pound. That same beef, pre-trimmed and split at a specialty butcher, costs $8 to $12. You do the math on a 15-pound cut. The difference is a skill that takes about 15 minutes to learn, and by the end of this video, you'll have it. Today, we're breaking down a whole packer brisket from start to finish, exactly the way a trained butcher does it. You'll learn what to trim, what to keep, how to separate the flat from the point, and, here's the part most tutorials skip entirely, what to do with all that leftover fat and trim so nothing goes to waste. Stick around, because the tip at the end about what to do with the fat cap is going to change the way you cook forever. Before we get the knife out, let's talk about what you're actually looking at. A whole packer brisket is made up of two distinct muscles sitting on top of each other, separated by a thick seam of fat. The bottom muscle is the flat. That's the lean, wide slab most people picture when they think brisket. The top muscle is the point, also called the decal. It's thicker, fattier, more marbled, and honestly more flavorful. When you buy a pre-trimmed flat at the store, someone has already removed the point and sold it separately. That's where your money goes. Now here's something that surprises most people. These two muscles actually run in slightly different directions. That matters a lot when it comes to slicing, but we'll come back to that because it's the detail that separates a good brisket from a great one. All right, let's get hands-on. You're going to need a sharp boning knife or a long, flexible slicing knife. A dull blade is the #1 mistake home butchers make. It tears instead of cuts, and it's actually more dangerous because you're using more force. So before anything else, hone that blade. Lay your whole packer brisket fat side up on a large cutting board. The first thing you'll notice is a thick, irregular layer of hard white fat covering most of the surface. This is called the fat cap, and your job is to trim it down, not remove it entirely. The target is a 1/4 inch of fat. Any more and it won't render during cooking. Any less and you lose the insulation and self-basting that makes brisket extraordinary. Use long, smooth strokes. Follow the contour of the meat. You're sculpting, not hacking. Here's a butcher's secret worth writing down. The fat you trim off is not garbage. Collect it in a bowl. Rendered brisket fat, what pitmasters call tallow, is one of the most flavorful cooking fats on the planet. It smokes at a high temperature, it carries smoky beef flavor into everything it touches, and it costs nothing if you save it. We'll talk about exactly how to render it in a moment. Once the fat cap is trimmed, flip the brisket over.
On the underside, you'll find a hard, waxy, yellowish fat, sometimes called the mohawk by Texas pitmasters, running along the seam where the flat and point meet. This fat is too dense to render properly during a cook. Remove it. Run your knife right along that seam, following the natural separation between the muscles, and peel that hard fat away. Your brisket will cook more evenly and absorb smoke better without it. Now look at the flat end of the brisket. You'll see a thin, tapered edge, almost translucent in places. That's called the thin end or the Texas crutch zone among competition cooks, because it dries out and overcooks before the thicker parts come up to temperature. Trim about 1 inch to 2 inches off this thin edge. You can cube that trim for burnt ends or grind it into burger blend. Nothing wasted. At this point, you have a decision to make. Are you cooking the whole packer together, which is the traditional Texas low and slow approach, or are you separating the flattened point to cook them differently or sell one? Either is valid. Here's how the separation works if you go that route. Find the thick seam of fat between the two muscles again. Starting at the thicker end of the brisket, insert your knife into that seam and follow it in long strokes, letting the natural separation guide you. The flat will peel away cleanly. The point will come off with most of the rich intramuscular fat still intact. 2 beautiful cuts from one. And here's that detail I promised you earlier, the one about grain direction. The flat's muscle fibers run lengthwise along the cut. The point's muscle fibers run at an angle, roughly perpendicular to the flat. This means when it's time to slice your finished brisket, you need to change your cutting angle as you transition from flat to point. Slice across the grain on both, but adjust as you move from one muscle to the other. Slicing with the grain, even on a perfectly cooked brisket, gives you tough, chewy slices. Against the grain, you get that legendary tender pull that almost melts before it hits your tongue. Now, about that tallow. Take all your fat trim, cut it into rough chunks, and put it in a heavy pot or cast iron skillet over low heat. Add just a splash of water to get it started without scorching. Over the next hour, that fat will slowly render into pure liquid gold. Strain it through a fine mesh strainer, pour it into a jar, and refrigerate. Use it to sear steaks, roast vegetables, fry eggs, or brush onto your next brisket mid-cook for an extra layer of flavor that no store-bought oil can replicate. Pitmasters who know this trick guard it like a secret. Now you know it too. Let's do a quick recap before the final tip. You've trimmed the fat cap to 1/4 inch. You've removed the hard waxy fat from the seam. You've cleaned up the thin end. You've separated the flat from the point if needed. And you've saved every scrap of trim for tallow.
That is a complete professional breakdown. That is exactly what a butcher charges you for when you buy pre-processed brisket. The strongest move you can make right now is to go buy a whole packer brisket on your next grocery run, ideally a USDA choice or prime grade for the marbling, and do this yourself. The first time takes 20 minutes, the 5th time takes 5, and every single time you're keeping that $40 in your pocket instead of paying someone else for a 15-minute skill. One last thing, and this is the detail most people never figure out on their own. When you're at the butcher counter or the warehouse store, pick up the brisket and flex it. A fresh, well-marbled packer brisket should be pliable. It should drape over your hands a little. Stiff, rigid briskets often have less intramuscular fat and tend to dry out during long cooks. That one physical test right there in the store can be the difference between a legendary cook and a disappointing one. Now it's your turn. What's the most intimidating cut of meat you've been scared to break down at home? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one, and it might just become the next video. If this saved you money or taught you something new, hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss a cut. Next time, we're taking that brisket point and turning it into something so ridiculous, so over the top, you're going to want to clear your weekend schedule.